Numbers are good, Bebop. You are cleared for travel.
In Bebop, they're often referencing films that they adore and they are huge fans of from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And we're all fans of those movies as well. So we had this joy of referencing referencing Bebop, which was referencing movies that we all love.
It's tough to categorize Cowboy Bebop. The wildly influential, jazzy neo-noir space western has become a new genre itself and doesn't neatly fit into science fiction. But even with its much bigger ambitions, Bebop set a new bar for spaceship design, and translating these iconic craft into live action was no easy task. This is building the Bebop. For all its artistry and maturity, Cowboy Bebop actually began the same way as countless other animated projects, a vehicle to sell toys of, well, vehicles. Creator Shinichiro Watanbe was initially given one instruction: as long as there's a spaceship in it, you can do whatever you want. Legendary mecha designer Kimitoshi Yamane concocted the perfect fusion of anime aesthetics and Western used future style, giving the crew of the Netflix series a solid, if slightly intimidating platform on which to build their version of the Bebop.
Well, we got very lucky because we were given all of the source material from the anime, piles and piles and piles of drawings that were all of the concept art, all of the development art. And then from there, we began crafting our own versions of it.
Kimitoshi is an incredible designer. So we were fortunate enough to have about 600 pages of black and white sketches from their thought process back when they were making the original Bebop, a lot of which never made it into Bebop, the original. So we had this resource of their inspiration and Kimitoshi Yamane's work. So we could mine that for style and to keep ourselves on track.
We definitely all watched the anime many times, referenced it in all our reviews, and we're trying to stay as loyal to it as possible. And I think in visual effects, one of the tricky parts of that is when do you break it? Because obviously with a 2D animation, you don't get a ton of 3D movement in the shots, because it's just a lot trickier to draw perspective in a hand-drawn 2D art form. Let's add a drift. Let's pull out and swing around. So you can show more of the ships. You can get more perspective on the ships, and and lend to a much more exciting shot from a visual standpoint.
Jet Black's Bebop, a massive fishing trawler turned bounty hunter bachelor pad, is depicted somewhat inconsistently in the original anime. For the uniformity required of live-action realism, the crew had to blend together the best possible version of the Bebop.
It's fascinating with the Bebop because in the anime, the Bebop does change shape a little bit if you really pay attention. Sometimes got a little bit more of a pot belly, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little more banged up. So we really took sort of the spirit of all of them and really crafted them into what we felt was the best shape for that ship.
I mean, the Bebop is ginormous. There was discussion whether it's anywhere from 50 meters long. Other times it looks like it's 150 meters long. And in the anime, you can kind of stretch and manipulate that depending on where it needs to be at the time. And so we had to have a lot of scale discussions about how big or small should it be.
One of the things that we do is definitely with the textures of the models, try to put in things that give a human scale to it, whether it's a door or a window or an engine piece that's like, okay, I kind of, that could have been on a jet fighter. So I kind of get that this is this size. So one of the nice things about our solar system that we're in with Bebop, a lot of the times we're able to throw planets in and moons in there, and we have the astro gates. So, we didn't have a lot of shots where the Bebop was just out there by itself, because those are the ones that are the trickiest to make feel real.
At any size, the Bebop is more than mere transport for the lost souls who live on board. Inside the ship, the designers turned the painted backgrounds of the anime into real sets to serve as a lived-in home for our heroes.
From the bridge all the way back through the living area, all the way back to the galley, that's one very large set. very, very large set, all fully ceilinged, fully practical downstairs. The rest of the ship is a separate set, but fully contained. All the walls are wild off the sides, so they can wild all the walls down one side or all the walls down the other side.
Sometimes you get, these sets that like, okay, we want a beautiful set so we can actually shoot block scenes and actually work. But that means it's bigger than the ship can be. The scale of the Bebop, where the set is, actually matches the scale of the sets. And, so when you look at the inside and then what we did with it on the outside, I feel like they tie together really well.
The sets reflect the soul of their owner, ex-cop turned bounty hunter Jet Black, who transformed an old fishing ship into a rough and tumble, chilled out bachelor pad all his own.
It's Jet's realm. It's his baby. At the front, the bridge, all the little chits from going through the astral gates all the time, all the park, either the fines or the tickets. And in that living area, we really mined the original anime for that yellow couch, the overhead big fan blades, literally going for those shots from the anime. Kind of work your way back through the living area, end up into the galley or the kitchen, and into Jet's kind of room where he does his bonsai. And he's not a particularly tidy man, but he's a busy and passionate man. It's definitely his home and it's his rules. He's got his jazz collection, he's got his turntable and his kitchen. We love all of that homeliness to the character, and we tried to imbue that.
As if the ship wasn't packed enough, it also has to store several zipcraft, smaller vessels like Spike's swordfish, a sleek red racer perfect for any outlaw.
I can't tell you how many different swordfishes we put together. A little bit longer on the nose, a little bit wider on the wings. What about the winglets? A little bit more damage. We put at least a dozen different swordfishes onto 3D turntables and looked at them and moved them around until, like magic, you just have that moment where you're like, you know what? That's the one.
We did originally plan to make a full-scale swordfish. There was a lot of discussion, about how big is that? Like, if we make the one from the anime, it's like ginormous. It's actually really quite big, the wingspan.
Well, this subtle little thing has to unfold and then fold back up into the ship because, Jet's getting into it. So, there's lots of little nuances like that.
We literally made the interior, the full interior, again referencing a lot of the anime, but then turning it into practical. Spike's is pretty much like a motorcycle inside the cockpit, and so it was actually on a couple of industrial mounts that allowed him to sort of lean left or lean right and actually move around inside the bubble of the cockpit. We always made it as analog as possible because there's nothing cooler than the sound of a V8 or the sound of a Triumph or a Norton motorcycle, or that sort of visceral joy of a real machine.
It took hundreds of sets and thousands of effect shots to bring the stylized future world of Cowboy Bebop into live action, thanks to the hard work of talented designers, technicians, and craftspeople who brought the ships into the third dimension and showed us a side of the Bebop that no one has ever seen before.